Thing working? Hello? Yes. No. Thank you for this introduction. I just want to make it clear, I'm right now, since having left the bank, I'm here on my own. So I don't have the shackles of representing various organizations that I have done for many years. So that is both sort of an opportunity and quite scary as well. Since this is a long day, and this must be the hardcore that is left, if you guys have as much energy left as I had just before I came up here, I would sort of suggest you guys to take 10 deep breaths quickly to get some more oxygen higher up, or as high up as you can get it. Now, while you do that, I can tell you that when I came here, I lost my luggage and my PC, and so far so good. But I had my backup in a separate place, but that was also taken. So the lesson here is have a backup of your backup somewhere else. Or maybe this dates me, because I'm sure you young people have already cloud backups and all types of other things. But that also means that I lost my presentation, and that's either good or bad, because that means I will not have a PowerPoint like everybody else, and I have made up my speaking notes scribbling along while we were sitting here. So I'm not sure whether it will be coherent, but here we go. So if I was a minister of a G20 countries, that means I would be a politician. That's quite scary in its own right, because I'm not a politician. I have no ambitions to be one. And the views I have would probably in today's Europe not elect me anyway, even though I would have thought that it should. But it was a little interesting for me to listen to Minister Gentiloni this morning, where he gave in his closing remarks the two options. Either EU disintegrates and becomes again a session of nationalistic, egocentric countries, or we find a longer-term solution based on EU's principles. That, I think, is pretty much in our tired afternoon faces. And what I have to say supports some of the issues that the minister was mentioning, even if I'm not a politician, and then he is. So, the three questions. If I was a G20 minister, I will say a bit about strategic considerations I would have, a little bit of the policy elements I would build into the policy. This is the asylum policy we are talking about. Why that's the case, and a bit on refugee work, refugees' right to work. I think there's a need for a comprehensive approach. Displacement crisis takes time to fix, and there is no quick fix. You need to consider the immediate, medium, and long-term implications. Basically, one has to have a long-term view from the beginning, and that means, by implication, that you have to have a more developmental type of orientation than a humanitarian one. You have to look at all issues, be they human, social, cultural, ethnic, religious, economic, fiscal, political, and security, and I probably forgot some. You cannot only look at the humanitarian aspect. You need to look at this in its whole system. Minister Gentiloni mentioned rightly that the EU had been caught sleeping in class on this. So now what they're doing knee-jerk reaction on a short-term vision only. And it doesn't seem to work very well. He also mentioned that, and it's also for all of us to see and hear. What I'm talking about here is sort of global, though, but I mean, I just make that reference. Policy, the second point of a policy that I would develop, should be in line with the refugee conventions, and we have heard through the day all what that means. Also, your human rights governance and child convention and whatever else exists there. It means the asylum right to seek asylum and protection against refoulement and the right to at least temporary housing, livelihood services and inclusion and so on. And the commitment by everybody that refugees should find a solution one day either resettlement, local integration, or return. I think there is a fourth solution, and that is allowing people to travel back and forth. This is against the principles of the 51 Convention, but I think in today's world this needs to be accepted and adapted to this policy. And I think there are many things you can talk about, migration, refugees and all that, but focus should be on those who are genuine refugees. We can talk about all types of other people movement, but then it becomes a murky cup of water. So I'd like to focus on what we ought to be doing for those that are genuine refugees. Our professor from Berkeley explained in grotesque detail what it means legally, so I shall not bore you with that, but it's still important. And also a connotation that has gone lost recently is that I remember an early UNHCR poster from my time there where a graffiti says, "Refugee go home." And there's he could if he would. He would if he could. Most refugees, given the option, whenever situations allow for it, will actually try to go home. This is something that is often forgotten in the debate we have. Whenever I have a few minutes left only, please tell me. Okay. There has to be a different approach to asylum seekers and refugees and migrants because the context and politics are different. Teresa already mentioned that. Most importantly, the policy should be unrestrictive and positive rather than restrictive and negative. This is what is missing. It requires a mindset change to twist that whole thing around. I mean, nobody wants to see conflict and conflict-induced forced displacement, but when it happens, we have to make the best out of it and look upon it with a half-full glass approach, not the other way around. And that is all I hear, having coming back from the US recently when I left the bank, listening to what's happening here in Europe. It's sort of not so pretty. So we need to have a positive frame of mind to promote normal life in dignity for displaced, for their hosts and for the refugees themselves. And then the policy should have, in its comprehensive approach, not only an asylum policy, but also real responsibility and burden sharing elements in the regions of origin where most of the refugees come from. I have my views on resettlement as an option. I spent a lot of time on this afternoon, but resettlement will never be the solution to the totality. Even if it is increased substantially, it will only be a minimal solution. You have maybe 12 million Syrians that are displaced today. It's inconceivable that more than, even with a tenfold increment in resettlement, only 10% will be able to achieve that. And there are many risks with the resettlement. There's a skimming of the cream. The best will go for resettlement, and the neighboring countries will be left with the less capable, and skills are needed eventually when a country like Syria needs to be rebuilt. There are many, many issues with this. I'm not going to be a spoiler, and I realize that we need to do new things, and the examples that were mentioned just before this panel are interesting, but they also have some red flag elements that we need to consider. Yeah, the policy I would develop would also have some action points. I mean, build effective and quick registration and determination procedure to quickly find out who's a refugee, who's a rejected asylum seeker, and who's a migrant. Have plans for each group, plan for regular migration procedures, and effective and sustained outreach and information to the displaced and nationals about respective rights and duties. I think this is not happening very well right now. So that's on the issue of refugees' right to work. I was asked to say something about, and the policy I would develop would seek that refugees and asylum seekers should not only be allowed to work, they should be requested to work. This may be in their own skills area or outside, as the case may be. Focus should be on harnessing and using their capacity to the benefit of the displaced and the economy, and only address vulnerability as needed. Today it's the other way around. We focus only on the negativistic vulnerability aspects of the displaced. We forget that they have capacities that should be used. This is part of the shift from restrictive and negative to unrestrictive and positive that needs to change in my view here under this policy. This may require initial economic investment to address a negative competition with nationals. So be it. So sometimes you have situations that cost money to solve. So there may have to be some space in the policy for area investments to boost economic affairs and create jobs for both nationals and refugees. Yeah, focus should be on displaced, the duty of the displaced to work, and less on their entitlement to free support. Because this is, first of all, what is, many refugees are sort of twisting towards that, and it also does not work well for the policy debate. All this policy should be implemented smartly, being aware of all the details, because we can make this as complicated as we want, as we have heard during the day, but we should be smart about this. These are, what I'm talking about here, sort of general policy directions. Why would I have such a policy? Because basically, first of all, it's about dignity and respect for other human beings. That I haven't heard much about since I came back to Europe. So idleness and dependency is degrading and undignified. It can lead to exclusion, degradation of self, poverty, loss of capacity, and perhaps even radicalization. So it is in countries' own self-interest to allow refugees to work. And active displaced or self-reliant displaced can contribute to the economy, pay taxes, build and maintain skills and save money, which is important for their return and reintegration when hopefully they can go home one day, and to have a decent life during displacement. This is one of the key reasons for, and then there are those who who will stay permanently, who will not go home after all. Under this policy, being started up with reintegration from the beginning, they would have a head start on social, economic, and cultural integration. And for those few unable to work, they would have the same benefits as nationals in that category. Bearing in mind that displaced people sometimes have specific trauma requirements for treatment that normal people or nationals non-displaced would maybe not have. This would reduce government expenditure on social services, reduce informal employment exploitation, and neutralize asylum seekers' drive towards free benefits. So a good intake process combined with support to regions of origin where the numbers are higher, that would sort of be, these points I mentioned here are the reasons why, if I was this minister, what is this? Oh, 1 minute. Okay, cool. So the policy now in place. So the next question is, how would that be the same if I was the minister for a developing country? Essentially, yes, it would, with some qualifications. Development countries may have capacity constraints, chronic underdevelopment, fiscal constraints, and maybe higher numbers, 15, 20, up to 30% of population may be displaced. So the same policy that I would decide on as a development country minister would also have a global good responsibility burden sharing request and lead from my side to external partners to help build capacity and boost economic development and have a package of resettlement offtake, but more importantly, financial support to boost economic activity in the areas where most of the refugees are in the first asylum country. And then I would have an element of working on regular migration procedures. All this in a longer term perspective, realizing that there's no quick fix to this. If I was a refugee, if I have 10 seconds to that, first of all, I would seek a place where it's safe and secure. Important for me and my family to have access to good education and health services. And then, on the what economic conditions. I should be allowed to work officially, do business, own productive assets, move freely, access to loans and banking facilities. Then that would sort of, the question was, what would the economic condition be for me to want to stay in the country of first asylum? That would be that. Then of course it would be also good if there's affordable housing and that there's a feeling of respect for me and my family and our presence there. Thank you.